Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. Glad to have you on board. It is April the 2nd, Tuesday, April the 2nd, so if you're watching live, it's Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. The call-in number is 640-3091. That's 640-3091, and as always, you're very welcome to call in and offer an opinion. Or have a question or a comment or whatever. I'm very happy to hear from you. Yesterday was April Fool's Day, and maybe I missed it, but usually I get one of my kids or somebody plays some trick on me, and unless I get trapped a day late, I think I skated free. I got a freebie there. The day before, of course, was the St. Patrick's Day parade on Sunday at 12 o'clock, and that was a great event again this year. And I'm obviously biased. I'm Irish, so it's a big deal for me. But sometimes it's a little questionable why in Manchester we do it, a week or two after March 17th, which is the actual St. Patrick's Day weekend. But I've grown accustomed to it, and I like it because it spreads the whole thing out by a couple of weeks. But sadly, there was a little bit of rain on Sunday morning, so we got what they would call in Ireland, it was a grand soft day. So we had a little bit of rain, but it didn't. I don't think it quelled people's joy too much. It was great to see lots of Manchester people out. There were people on the streets, lots of great bands and community groups, etc., marching, and it was great afterwards to see the bars and restaurants in Manchester. Full with people and lots of activity and people just enjoying themselves. And it's in contrast with the image that we sometimes see and that we're asked to accept, that there's something about Manchester that it's not a place that you should feel free to walk around, and that it's unsafe, etc. And I understand the concern, but I have to tell you, I walk in downtown Manchester all the time, and I don't feel intimidated, and I don't feel unsafe. I've walked around unsafe cities. I know what they feel like, and I've lived in unsafe places, and I know what that feels like. And I do recognise the terrible tragedy and the 3 lives lost over on South Willow Street last week, and that's a tragedy in any community, and so that has to be recognised. But it is in the end, it's a function of the size of the city one lives in, and sadly that's just reality. I do want to take an opportunity to lend my voice to those who thanked the people involved in that incident, our first responders, the police department first and foremost, and Chief Capuano, and the work that he is doing with his people. We take it for granted all the time, but they never know the day. The men and women of the Manchester Police Department and police officers generally never know the day when their turn will come to face something. So they're incredibly brave, and I feel safe under their guarding, and so my compliments to them and my gratitude to them. And I think the vast majority of people feel the same way. I think it's important to say that the vast majority of people that I speak to in the city of Manchester are grateful to our police and the fire service and the ambulance service for the work that they do every day, not just at moments of inflection like last week. But I have to say that I listen to those, and I question those who are public representatives in our city who use an opportunity like the episode last week on South Willow Street, and I just happened to be looking at some stuff as I was waiting to come on air right now, and I saw a piece about. The piece was in Paul Feely's article in the Union Leader last week, and Paul Feely was writing. The headline has to do with the potential swap between that perhaps Alderman Shea in Ward 9 says he might run for school board after his many years on the board of Mayor and Aldermen. He is a former teacher and principal. He's the dean of the board of Mayor and Aldermen, and he deserves our respect, and he certainly has mine and gratitude for the time that he has spent. So he is considering running for that he may switch and run for school board. I have to say, to be honest, that I do respect the time and the effort and the amount of his life that Representative Shea, Alderman Shea has given to the city of Manchester, and most other people's contributions pale in comparison to it. But I also have to say that Alderman Shea has been on the board of the Mayor and Aldermen while our schools have been defunded and downsized and attacked, and he has not spoken up against that, and I don't want to single him out. I don't think he was, somebody who was leading any of that or causing any of that. But just to be frank and to be honest about it, when you've served on the board of Mayor and Aldermen in the city of Manchester for 10 or 20 years, and while you were there, average teacher salaries, average class sizes, average per pupil spending, all of it went further and further down in comparison to all the surrounding towns. So I would give a failing grade to those who have, all of them, who have served long term in the city of Manchester on our board, Mayor and Alderman, because they have accepted the easy road and refused to stand up for the children of the city of Manchester. And I hope those words are not too strong, but I believe them, and I think the facts show that it is true. In the end, when you look back after a career, you look at the results of the things you did. I think anybody who was mayors and aldermen and everybody else who have been part of the governance of the city of Manchester over the last 2 decades can rightfully look and point out to the development of various things, the growth of business in we talk about the Millyard, but not just the Millyard, all the other places, and the vibrancy of the city with regard to now, the building of two new hotels, which there are tens of hotels here already, but the restaurants, the whole vibe of the city, and so insofar as group of politicians led by a mayor affect those things, then they deserve credit. And so they have some effect in it. I don't think they can do it. It's not as though there's a direct line between if the Board of Mayor and Aldermen really do their jobs right, then a city will flourish, and if they don't do their jobs right, it won't. It's not a straight line equation. But clearly, when a city has done as well as Manchester has over the last couple of decades, others can allocate the proportion, but there's no question but that some of the praise and some of the gratitude of the citizens ought to be with the people in office. And so I grant that to them, and they deserve it. Equally, when you look at the Manchester school system, which is the outlier here, which is the function of the city that has decreased in efficacy and in the way that it's viewed. It's everything about it. It's number of teachers, its number of students, the confidence of the public, the age and quality of the buildings, all the way along the line. Well, lots of people can talk about there are good things happening in Manchester schools. Of course there are. There are great things happening in Manchester schools. Lots of great things happening in Manchester schools. But there are great things happening in schools all across the state. But in Manchester, educators and administrators and principals are being asked to do more and more with less and less all the time. So back to the article from Paul Feely talking about this potential swap, where Ross Terrio has said, Ross Terrio is the He's been on this show a couple of times. He is the school board member for Ward 9. So Ross Terrio has stated that he will run for the aldermanic position in Ward 9 if the dean of the aldermanic board, Bill Shea, decides to run for school board. So we could see a swap there. But that's interesting, I guess, for those of us looking at education. I'm going to have to talk to Ross long and hard because let's leave that as it is. He's a friend of mine, and we agree to disagree on some things, but it'll be an interesting dynamic. But what I do want to talk about on that article is later in the same article, there's this piece that it says, let me see. So the question was, will she or won't she, he says, and he's referring to Mayor Joyce Craig. With Mayor Joyce Craig raising the curtain on the FY 2020 budget last week, the next big announcement expected out of the corner office at City Hall is whether she will seek a second term in office. This space says it's a sure bet. So I think it's a sure bet too. One possible opponent is former State Rep Victoria Sullivan, who's been very active on Twitter recently, pointing out issues in the city while using the hashtag Craig's Chaos. So I know Victoria, and she was she was a state rep from Manchester. She lost her seat in the last election, and I don't these things are not personal, but so I like to stick to policy. And I would just have to say that Victoria Sullivan demonstrated clearly to me during her years as a state rep that she let me put it another way. When she had the opportunity, she voted for bills in Concord that reduced the funding to the city of Manchester. So I know I don't want to misrepresent what Victoria Sullivan believes about schools, because I don't know enough, and I don't want to wrong her by saying the wrong thing. So I only want to talk about the things that I do know. But I considered her somebody while in Concord. She was one of the reps that I have referred to, not by name previously, but she was one of those who was up in Concord, elected by the people of Manchester, and then carrying water for outside groups and overseeing a system that was downshifting costs from Concord down to the taxpayers of Manchester. And she voted continually for bills that would have diminished public education, promoted private or non charter schools and so-called school choice, the subsidy of using public money for private and religious schools, and the whole panoply across that. So I'm not a big fan if it comes to schools, and I can't imagine a Mayor Sullivan and what the schools might look like if there ever was such a thing. Frankly, I don't think that she has much of a chance of winning. So I think probably the Craig campaign might welcome such an opponent. But I do want to say this, and I'm getting to something here with regard to the safety of the city. And I started with the parade last week and people walking around and all the fun that people were having. And I've seen this now from numerous people, and I'm not going to call everybody out right now, but there are people in this city who are using every opportunity they can, not just the event of the 3 people being killed last week at the Quality Inn, but any other incidents, and they're using it to tear down the city of Manchester and attack the city of Manchester. And I would say that this is what's quoted in the Union Leader. I don't follow Ms. Sullivan on her social media, so I don't know what else she might have said, but it says here in the article, it says, one possible opponent, former State Rep Victoria Sullivan, has been active on Twitter recently. I read that. Okay. So during and after last week's officer-involved shooting incident at the Quality Inn Hotel, Sullivan tweeted that Joyce Craig had said, "This is a reminder of the occasional dangers we face in this city." And then Victoria Sullivan says, is she serious? 3 dead after officer-involved shooting, and friends are reporting they were eating at Friendly's last night with their children when it had to be evacuated due to gunfire at the hotel across the street. You should be able to go out to eat without worrying about the safety of your family. So this is talking about the chaos, right? In the city, and that calling it Craig's chaos, etc. I've seen another public figure referring to it as Afghanistan, Manchganistan. I think it's Manchganistan. I have to say that I was watching there's a show on public television here. It goes out on Wednesday nights, and it's called the Will and Joel Show, and I know it's Joel Kelly Levasseur and Will Infantine, and Will is a former, Joe of course is an alderman at large, and Will is a former state rep himself, and I was just I may not agree with them politically, but I've always been treated with respect by Will, and so I don't mean him any disrespect. But I have to say that when I was listening last week or the week before, or watching, and he talked about. He wouldn't come downtown. This studio from where I am speaking tonight is on Elm Street, on the 4th floor of a building in the centre of Elm Street, and there are programs come out of here at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. There are recordings going on. There's actually a couple of studios here. There's a couple of radio studios. So there's a lot of activity just where this building goes on, and there are elderly people and young people, etc., in and out of this building. So when I heard Will saying the other night, a couple of weeks ago, he said basically that he doesn't come downtown anymore, and his show is at 8 o'clock, I think, or 7 or 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. Not that I want to advertise them, but, they're, I guess it's fine if I do, but... he said, he doesn't come down to go unless he's protecting himself, unless he's packing. I took it to mean that he was carrying a firearm, and I just find that that and the rest of the comments about how Manchester is unsafe and it's gone to the dogs, and it's just I don't understand it. I don't understand how. People who actually, if they come down to the city of Manchester and walk up and down Elm Street and visit the restaurants and the bars and see the thousands and thousands of people who are sitting in bars and restaurants up all around Elm Street and the places around it. New restaurants opening all the time, beautiful places. The 110 Grill, which I was in a couple of weeks ago. What a wonderful place. There's a new restaurant opening at the Hebert building. It's extraordinary. There are so many great places, and now on the side streets off of Elm Street there are lots of great eateries, and people come from all over. People come to eat and go out for a night in Manchester from places like Portsmouth or as far away as Peterborough, and they come down from Concord and beyond, and all the towns in between, and come up from Nashua, and there are people from all around the state who are out having a good time in Manchester every night. And then there are the students here from St. Anselm's and from the Art Institute. There are now 3,000 undergraduate students on campus at Southern New Hampshire University on the Hooks at Manchester Line. They're out at night time in the places they like to go. It's a vibrant, happening place. And yet we have a political class or a part of a political class in Manchester who I think for their own purposes, or perhaps they are fear-filled people. I don't know what it is, but they want to portray Manchester as some kind of, as they use words like Manchganistan and Craig's chaos, which is what Victoria Sullivan is using it. I would suggest they actually come downtown, and I'm happy to meet them anytime downtown. Now, let's be clear. I've had conversations with many people on this, but I've talked to Alderman Tim Baines, who has led the effort on behalf of his ward, which is Ward 3 right here, and also on behalf of the businesses and restaurants in Manchester. He owns Mint Restaurant, a beautiful restaurant that I highly recommend, right on Elm Street. And he has been leading the effort about panhandling and homelessness, etc. And homeless people on the street. That is certainly an issue. It's not as though it's not as though it's wall to wall, etc. I'm not negating the fact. As I said, I've had conversations with Alderman Tim Baines about this. I understand his concern. I think there are proposals now to employ somebody. One of the recommendations was to bring somebody in to oversee sort of, the response to homelessness and some other things, but that's sort of outside my area of competence. Some people would say almost everything's outside my area of competence, but at least it's outside the area that I feel comfortable talking about a lot. So there is that problem, but there are problems everywhere. There are problems in every city, in every town, in every neighbourhood. When I read on the newspaper about some fist fight that happens someplace, and if it happens to be in Manchester, and I look on the report afterwards, and it reads that Mr. A from Hooksett hit Mr. B from Pembroke in the face outside some bar. Or I see that some girl from Londonderry had an argument with her friend who was from Wyndham outside some other place. So I don't want to dump on those particular towns, but I'm just saying this is not at all a function of, there are terrible people in Manchester and Manchester is terrible. No, Manchester is not terrible at all. There are tens of thousands of people coming to Manchester all the time. And the St. Patrick's Day Parade was a wonderful example of young people and families and babies and strollers and old ladies and elderly gentlemen and veterans and every walk of and strata of society was represented on the sidewalks and streets of Manchester, marching in that parade and standing by the streets in that parade. And anybody who didn't feel safe on Sunday at the St. Patrick's Day Parade, I think they've got a problem with fear and paranoia. And anybody who chose not to go to something like that because they were afraid of coming downtown Manchester is at least uninformed or misinformed. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, don't believe those who tell you that Manchester downtown is not a safe and fun environment to be in. And I don't see people, my friends, and I'm lucky to have a few. None of them feel the need to be packing weapons as they go out for a meal in Manchester. I don't know if these people have ever gone to New York or Boston or Los Angeles or London or Paris or Rome or any other civilized urban setting anywhere in the United States, or even some small town in the central part of the United States. And Manchester. There's nothing unsafe about Manchester, so it's mostly in your head if you're feeling that. And I object to, I've spent a long time fighting for schools in the city of Manchester and so that our kids can have the things that they need and they want and that they deserve, and that our teachers are properly respected and compensated so we can have the best teachers teaching the best kids in the best schools in the state, and that's been a pretty desolate and forlorn position sometimes in this city, and so. But I will continue that fight. I intend to continue that fight. I do that constantly, and I'm always aware, and I speak often about the fact that my dilemma is that I want to be praising of the city of Manchester. I want to recognize the great things that our teachers are doing, that our students are doing, the achievements that we have and that we continue to accumulate. But yet that hasn't stopped me and will not stop me from saying that we're doing that despite our political leadership rather than because of it. And the same thing with the city, or something slightly different with the city. The city of Manchester generally is, if you compare it to surrounding towns or you compare it to other cities in the state of New Hampshire, then it comes out looking pretty good. And it depends on what measure you want to use. But any of the statistics, any of the measures and the data you might like to use to measure an urban area across the state of New Hampshire, Manchester comes out looking pretty good. It's a fun, vibrant, business-friendly, growing, dynamic, exciting city to be part of. And there are lots of young people coming into the city, young, under 40s who are setting up home and setting up a shop, so to speak, in the city of Manchester. And sadly, the city, the tax cap and our aldermen have their boot on the neck of growth in the city because they refuse to recognise the fact that our schools need to be funded. Our schools look bad statistically, they look bad financially, they look bad physically. And that has to stop, and people have to make a difference. So I wish school board member Terry O'Well, if he intends to run for Ward 9, or if Alderman Bill Shea decides to stay there or move to the school board, but both of them, who I recognise in different ways for different things, both of them need to realise that there's a new day in Manchester, and that people are not willing to accept a school system that is not well funded and well financed, and that is the least well financed one in the state of New Hampshire. And we're working to change that, and I'm confident that it will change over time. In the long haul, I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very hopeful that and confident even, that the next generation, the generation that's coming into Manchester today, and the young people of the city of Manchester will not accept this out-of-date, Luddite, anti-progressive, hold the line kind of mindset that would keep Manchester back in the dark ages. We wouldn't have traffic lights; we'd still have horse-drawn whatevers and troughs for horses to drink water out of on Elm Street if some of the people on the board, Mayor and Alderman, had their way, because they wouldn't spend dime one on a traffic light anywhere. Let me go someplace else. Tonight, by the way, you have about 30 minutes if you're watching this live. If you're a Hillside parent, the parent-teacher organisation is having their meeting tonight at 7 o'clock at Hillside in the library. I'm accused sometimes of being a little Hillside-centric, and I admit to it, and I'm sorry. I recognise that the other three middle schools, Parkside, Southside and McLaughlin, all have wonderful attributes as well. And you'll have to forgive me for not that it was my alma mater, but since I was the president of the PTO there for 6 or 7 years, I feel strongly towards it. So anyway, their PTO meeting is on tonight, and last night, for instance, was the citywide committee of parent involvement. I don't know how that meeting went last night, but generally speaking, there's been a very small population at it, and so I would just urge people, if you you don't have to go to these things, and you don't have to be part of your PTO, but if you're interested in schools and you're interested to know what's going on, then I would suggest that you step up and find out when your monthly PTO or PTG or PTA, whatever you may have in your school, is, and go out. There is always a need for more people, and also these organisations are not that large where you as an individual couldn't step in and make a large difference and actually kind of mould a lot of it in your likeness and have it respond to your direct needs. Another item I want to mention, which is again subjective and close to my heart, is that the Ancient Order of Hibernians, of which I'm a proud member, my brothers in the AOH and I will be meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Sweeney Post. And anybody who's Irish or of Irish extraction in the city of Manchester, and actually the funny thing about that meeting is, when you go to the monthly Ancient Order of Hibernian meetings, it always surprises me how far people come for that meeting. There are people there even from the sea coast, but people show up from the surrounding towns, and they're all brave men. Of many of them are veterans, and but not all by any means, and they I don't think they sneak out of their cars cowering and dodging between cars to sneak into the building because they're afraid to walk in Manchester under cover of darkness at 7 o'clock. I seen them get out of their cars, stand upright, and stride purposefully towards the building, happy to be there and confident in themselves, and they don't feel the need to have a bazooka, a rocket launcher, and a submachine gun strapped onto them as they scurry around and afraid they might be approached by a panhandler. But then again, as Irish people, we're not really known for our cowardliness. So that's the AOH. I just wanted to touch off of that. I also, as part of my sort of recognising some things, there's if you're a young person in the city of Manchester, and that's a broad definition of young people, so school people, school-age kids like high schoolers or maybe even middle schoolers, I don't know. There's a youth issues forum tomorrow evening from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It's on at the Bookery, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the Bookery, talk about things happening on Elm Street. I guess the Bookery's open about a year now or so. But what a wonderful addition to the city of Manchester to have a store. Think about Gibson's up in Concord and the store in Peterborough and others, but, the Bookery has been added to the vast array of opportunities for people to go to in the city of Manchester, and that's a great place if you ever have a half an hour or 2 hours if you want to spend and browse some books and drink a coffee, and it's just a wonderful place, and it's also a public sort of gathering place and has a growing reputation in that. They're wonderful people there. They're hosting tomorrow night. The Youth Issues Forum. I know that Alderman Will Stewart from Ward 2 is involved in, at least as a speaker there or something, but there are also, I saw that a couple of the high school representatives are going to be there, but it's the Youth Issues Forum. It's open for any young people who'd like to come and talk about issues affecting youth in the city, and it's from 6 to 7:30 tomorrow night at the Bookery on Elm Street. And then last to sort of this, or second last maybe to this list, is I'd like to congratulate the first robotics team at West High School, who Team 501, and it's a combined West High School, Goffstown High School team. They reached the semi-final of the New England District competition this past weekend, and they also won the award for entrepreneurship and for safety. And so I have to tell you that, congratulations to those young people, and there are such great opportunities today in the areas of, science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM subjects, that any young person who's involved in robotics, I know several young men and women, I actually know many now, who are either in college, just graduated, or have graduated, who've got just stupendous careers already with, in very lucrative businesses, and are just doing great things. So not alone is it a career where you actually get to make some real money. But you also, if you choose to, you can be working on cutting-edge things that have a real impact on people's lives. On the technology side, for sure, but even on the engineering side. Science is exciting. It's a great opportunity, and in our schools, from middle schools, I think they're not in elementary schools, but I hope I'm not wrong about that. But certainly in our middle schools and in the high schools, there are robotics teams, and they're just a wonderful opportunity. And young people should, you talk about the great things that happen in our schools. This is one of them. And let me go. I want to go back to mention that in the city, but I want to go to one other thing. So congratulations to West, the students at West, for that. And the other thing, my other pet thing, of course, is that I've been a soccer guy a lot of my life, and even though I'm not directly involved in with a position in soccer today, it is now, once we get to the 1st of April, this is a time for parents to be thinking about summer camps and even fall registration for various leagues, etc. And whether it's hockey or football or baseball or whatever it is you might, I don't know, tennis, whatever it might be. But soccer also, right? Boys and girls, all ages. You can go online and Google the soccer leagues in the city, and I'm not against people getting involved in travel soccer at all. I think travel soccer is great, where you pay a higher amount of money and your kids go on teams and they travel around the state or even beyond the state to surrounding states, and they play tournaments and games, and it's exciting and it's a lot of fun. Ultimately, having been through it and have had kids played in it, and I was fully sort of paid up supporter of these things. I've always been strongest in my support for recreational games, and sadly, we're not going to go down that rabbit warren today. But more and more parents think that if you spend more, you get more, and oftentimes they're beguiled by the idea that little Mary or little Johnny is a prodigy or could be a prodigy, and sort of they're guilted into it, and a combination of pride and guilt is a pretty powerful thing. And parents end up spending money on little kids, and by little I even mean 10, 11 and 12-year-olds. And there is so much fun to be had in recreational leagues. You don't have to travel over, 20 cities between here and Connecticut in order to play a game of soccer if you're a 12-year-old. There's an awful lot of kids playing soccer between here and there. And by the way, if you actually do the math, and with great respect to the travel teams like what was Manchester Soccer Club, now part of Manchester North, but Seacoast United and GPS in Bedford, with the great things that they might do. And when you look at the kids who actually make it and end up playing soccer at a professional level and cashing out, so to speak, the ones that I know are a lot of them are public school players who played recreational city leagues and went on to the big time through that way. So anyway, if you have young kids in your house, the first rule is to get them out and have them do something. Anything's better than sitting at home next fall or during this summer, on the Xbox, the Wii, or whatever the latest gadget might be. And it's sort of, if you don't, if you organize something for them and have something planned for them, then they will be out, and guess what? You'll be out watching them, and it'll be good for everybody. So, just a reminder: summer camps, fall leagues. You can sign up if you go to MNSL. This is for Manchester North Soccer. There's also South, West, East and North. I almost had trouble remembering the points of the compass there for a minute. That would have been funny. But MNSL, Manchester North Soccer League, MNSL.org would get you to the website for those. And the British Are Coming Soccer Camp is about 27. I think this is 27th year. Is a wonderful program, and it's on the very last week of July, and like tripping over into August, sort of that week right there. And it's a lot of fun at Livingston Park. So let me mark off all the things that I have covered here. The other issue is that we're coming now to the end of Dr. Vargas's stay regime in the city of Manchester, and if I haven't said it explicitly before, he was on this show 2 weeks ago, and we had a wonderful talk, and we could have talked for 3 more shows, and I remember saying that I was grateful to him for coming in, but I just wanted to be clear, if I haven't been clear before, that I am disappointed that he is leaving and saddened, and I think it's a great loss for the city, and I'm hoping that the person who replaces him will be as good as he was, and maybe even better if that can be the case. But certainly it's going to be a challenge to find somebody. The intention is to have that person hired and have them here by the 1st of July, and the timeline for hiring, etc., is on the Manchester School website. So if you go to MANSD, that's ST for school district website, there is a survey. I don't know if you'd call it, is it a survey? I guess it is a survey. For, if I can find it, I thought I had it on here. Yes, I think I do. Yes, I think I do. Yeah, so there's a survey for the position of the superintendent. So you can, let me see, that's the superintendent, the position description is on there, and qualifications, etc., and what's needed. But there's also, that's that. But if I could find the actual, there's a survey that's on the website that's just not coming up for me as I'm trying to pull through it right now. Redistricting questions. Where was that? It was right on the front a minute ago. And oh yeah, here it is, right on the front. It was above the fold rather than below it. So the Manchester School District Board of School Committee is soliciting input in the superintendent selection process. So it's on the website, and I have to commend the city of the Manchester School District for beginning this process of opening up conversations to a more diverse group of parents and communities in the city. Today, 43% of students in the city of Manchester are in our schools are non-white. I hate using that term. It's just the way that it's described. But I do hate to use that term because it sort of, it doesn't cover what I'm really trying to cover. But I'm using the nomenclature that's in use, and I don't know the figure how to break it down otherwise. But the website for Manchester School District has got the survey is there in English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Swahili, and Nepali. So you can go on, or if you have friends who are not fluent English speakers would like to go on, you can go on. It's only about well, we can look at it. It's a pretty quick 2 or 3 minute survey. And you can go on and fill it out, and let me see, there are 5 questions. And the first question is, tell us the good things about your community. This information is used to help us recruit quality candidates. So whatever you believe about Manchester and the good things about the city, and there are a hell of a lot of those. If you need a list, call me, because I can give you a long list, and as fast as you can write, I can give you a list of the good things about the city of Manchester. Tell us the good things about your schools. This information is used to help us recruit quality candidates also. So the good things about the schools, well, there are a lot of good things in our schools. It's not quite as robust a list as I would like it to be, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you. Then what issues should a superintendent be aware of as he or she comes into the school district? So you can choose your topic. But that's the third question, and I was going to sort of help you to fill the survey out. And then the fourth item is, what skills, qualities, or characteristics should the new superintendent possess to be successful here? And these duplicate the questions that were asked at the public forums, which were held a couple of weeks ago. And then the last question is just, please indicate the stakeholder group you represent, whether you're an administrative teacher, student, parent, community member, etc., etc. So I would say you could do this survey in less than 5 minutes, and again, it's about public participation and all of us having our voices heard, and so why not? You can do this from your armchair. You don't have to go anywhere. Just step out and do it. The other thing is that I'm sorry to hear that which is another big hit for the city. The city's director of human resources, Pam, is going to be leaving us. The city is the school superintendent's last day in office is the last day of April, and the director of human resources will be leaving 3 days before that. So. For those of you who may not be familiar with the hierarchy in the City of Manchester schools, losing Dr. Vargas is a big hit. Now, luckily, we have Assistant Superintendent Amy Lynn and Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Gillis, who are 2 products of the Manchester, have been principals and assistant principals in Manchester middle schools, and both wonderful people and very capable. So that's the good news. We have two great assistant superintendents who are there to add, to bring institutional knowledge and to have a continuum, and so that there won't be as any gaps, perhaps, or at least the gaps will be mitigated. But losing the director of human resources, another wonderful lady, who has all the knowledge and the nuance of managing this group of between 1,000 and 2,000 between teachers and support teachers and everything else. So to be losing her at the same time is a big deal. And while all of this is going on, of course, we still sit here with no contract for our teachers and secretaries and support staff and administrators and principals and the 5 or 6 different groups in the city, which is appalling. It seems to me, I despair when I watch school board meetings and Board of Mayor and Alderman meetings occurring in the city of Manchester, and it's as though nothing was happening. It's like it used to annoy me back during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, when the nightly news would go down and 3 more service people were lost. Had fallen the previous day, and some newscasts didn't even recognize them. And I was always grateful to CNN, who every single night for years scrolled the names of those who were lost, and because there were people being lost every day, sometimes way too many. Even one was too many, of course. But I don't want to go back to that now, other than to say that a nation that no longer is aware that there are young men and women on the front lines protecting us, and they are today. But right here in Manchester, we have thousands of public employees who haven't had a pay increase or a cost of living increase. So effectively, they have less money in real terms than they had last year or the year before, because they're not keeping up with inflation. Inflation was 2-point-something% in generally across CPI last year, closer to 3%. It was 2.3% over the preceding 3 years. So 2 years without a pay increase means that you've had an effective pay decrease of 5%. If you're putting food on the table and you're buying meat and vegetables and trying to clothe your kids and paying for gasoline and paying for keeping the roof over your head, it's one thing to be paid less well than comparable teachers in other districts, but then to compound that injustice by refusing to pay teachers is just awful. And the fact that 14 members of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are having a meeting tonight at 7 o'clock, and it's possible there could be a peep about it, but there's usually not. And 14 members of the school board succeed in having meetings, and they discuss food policy and dress code policy and public disclosure policy. And by the way, I wish they were talking just about policy, but because just when I hear myself say that, their rightful role is to talk about policy. But they will spend hours discussing some event at some school, or trying to micromanage the staff, a place they should just get out of. And all the time, there are thousands of public employees, and these people are our neighbours. They live with us. They live on our streets. They come home from the supermarket on Thursday, Friday night, or Saturday morning, and are emptying the bags out of their car right there next to us. They're not strangers. They're people we know. And we're their employer, so to speak, and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen represents us. And for some reason, members of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the school board, I don't know, maybe they do blush. If I were a member of the school board and I was living on the same street as a teacher, I think I'd be running in and out the back door of my house so I wouldn't have to face them. And unless I was at the meeting saying, when any new business comes up, instead of talking about something like I will talk about, that there's a PTO meeting on here, I had a great time at the band concert there, I'd be saying, hey, boys and girls, we have thousands of employees who need to be paid honorably for the honorable work they're doing. I don't understand. And frankly, I talked last week about the teachers' union in the city of Manchester. I don't teach in the schools in Manchester. I don't have a sister or a brother or a cousin or anybody close to me who teaches in the schools of Manchester, and yet it agitates me no end to think that this is the way we treat our public employees. And I don't usually. I'm talking about the system, and the school, and the teachers are just one part of that system. The teachers and all the other support staff and everybody else are just one part of that system. My problem is that the system is ill-funded. That we don't have money for books, and we don't have money for technology. We don't have money for tables and chairs. We don't have money to fix the leaking roof. We don't have money to fix the parking lot. We don't have money for proper athletic programs. We don't have money for proper science curricula. We don't have money for math curricula. We don't have any of those things. And we have 30 kids in a class, sometimes 39, when someone's out missing or something, and we're playing around the edges. It's unfathomable to me. The war just seems to go on, and it not to be overly dramatic when I compare it to what was going on when the real fighting was going on, so to speak, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and many people just went about their lives like kind of, doesn't concern me, out of sight, out of mind. Don't ask, don't tell. Let's just move right on. So it's appalling, and I'm reminded of an issue from last week's news, which had to do with our in quotation marks friend Betsy DeVos, the Secretary for Education, who is proposing a budget reducing $68.6 billion from the education funding in the state in the United States. And you just have, and so I'm a big fan of the Special Olympics, and rightfully I can understand why people got irate when the Trump administration decided that it was eliminating the funding for completely, not reducing it, eliminating the funds for Special Olympics. $18 million out of all those billions. $18 million, that's where they chose, as one of the many places they chose to make the cut. Now, of course, being the dishonest person that he is, and I don't mean to annoy people who support him, but it's just true, he is a dishonest person, and you'd have to be from Mars not to know that. Being the dishonest person that he is, President Trump announced, after there was a big kerfuffle and a national outrage, that Betsy DeVos and his administration were eliminating the funding for Special Olympics, and he comes out with feigned magnanimity, and I've directed that's to change. Well, I don't know, you directed it had been put in there, or else you didn't read your own budget, Mr. President. It's one thing, is it your budget? Did you read it? Oh, that's right, you don't read anything, I forgot. You go with your gut. You don't read anything. So you have no idea what's in your budget. So it's not really your budget at all. It's the budget of the multimillionaires that you've employed as secretaries in the various departments. So Betsy DeVos, a woman who was handed wealth by her father in the hundreds and millions and billions, has never had to, she's never had to go to a supermarket, walking around trying to, thinking what's the cost of chicken this week and what's on sale, and maybe we can have sausages on Saturday night, and if I cut them in half, they'll last 2 days. She's never had those problems. Or where's the money for the gas? Maybe we won't be able to go out tomorrow night or go somewhere, or maybe, my son will have to walk because it's raining, but I can't afford to drive him there. She doesn't have those problems. But she has no problem with eliminating funding for schools. And what annoys me about it is the 21st Century Program, which is here in the city of Manchester, funds all kinds of things. It's federal funding for that we're able to apply for and get, and it's given to districts all across the United States. And the after-school programs in the city of Manchester are funded through 21st Century. And what happens? they've decided to eliminate them. The SEOG grants, which are very small amounts of money, I mean, in comparison to what the cost of college is today, they can vary anything from about $200 up to I think the maximum might be 1,000, I think, per student. But it's money that is available for lower income, and by that I don't mean the poorest of the poor. I mean those as well, but up into the middle class. It's money that helps young people to pay for college, and that's being eliminated. My point is, and I'm not. It's not that I'm not troubled by the fact that they would attack the Special Olympics, that these billionaire people who are now running our government would do this. It doesn't surprise me, but the public outrage about the Special Olympics ought to be matched by outrage about the that was $18 million. What about the outrage about the other 68 point something billion dollars? Closest people have used the figure $70 billion to round it off, but it's 68 point something billion dollars. What about the outrage about that? What about the elimination of funding for all classes of if I could find it, I had it here, but as usual. So just a few of these, right? The Comprehensive Literary Development Grants, Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants, that's the SEOG grant that I talked about, Full Service Community Schools, the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education, Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness. This is the list of things being cut by the Department of Education. Graduate assistance in areas of national need, impact aid payments for federal property, innovative approaches to literacy, international education and foreign language studies domestic programs, international education, foreign language studies overseas programs, the Javits Gifted and Talented Education Program, Native Hawaii Education, Promised Neighborhoods, Ready to Learn programming, Special Olympics, of course, statewide family engagement centres, student support and academic enrichment grants. I love the one here. There's one I just don't see it right now, but it's for civics. For funding civics in schools and eliminating the funding for civics in our schools, and yet the pretend patriots who like to walk around with flags hanging off of them and lapel pins saying I'm holier than thou and more patriotic than you, but they're supporting policies that would eliminate funding for civics in schools. You can't have it both ways, guys. So stay awake, pay attention. We will keep the fight up. Be involved in your kids' education. Know what's going on. Please, in Manchester, talk to your public representatives and tell them that our schools, our students, our teachers, our secretaries, our principals, and our administrators deserve honest day's pay for an honest day's work. I leave you with that message. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Good night now. Bye-bye.